You're standing at the entrance to a tunnel running beneath an Amish farmhouse in Holmes County, Ohio. No wiring, no machinery, no thermostat humming on the wall, and the air flowing out of that tunnel is 55 degrees in the middle of August. This isn't a prototype. It isn't an experiment. It's a $300 system that cools a home to 55 degrees using nothing but the ground beneath it and a fan that draws less electricity than a single light bulb. The Amish have been building versions of it for 2 centuries. The cooling industry became aware of it in 1930, and in 1930 they made a deliberate decision to ensure you would never find out about it. After my last video, hundreds of you asked the same question. What about summer? What about keeping a home cool without paying for it? So I went back to Holmes County, and what I found underneath those farms traces back to the same physics the Persians used to store ice through 120-degree desert summers more than 2,400 years ago. And yes, this applies to homes that were already built decades ago. Here is the number that changes everything. At 6 feet below the surface, the ground temperature stabilizes. It locks in and holds constant year-round, completely disconnected from whatever is happening above it. Summer heat, winter cold, none of it reaches that depth fast enough to matter. Oak Ridge National Laboratory, which is the Department of Energy's own research facility, measured ground temperatures city by city across the United States. In Chicago, the ground holds at 55 degrees year-round. In Atlanta, 62. Denver sits at 58, Phoenix at 67, Minneapolis at 52. And in Holmes County, Ohio, right where those Amish farms stand, the soil temperature stays at 54 degrees every single day of every single year. It does not change. Now, hold that thought for a moment and consider what it costs to cool your home the conventional way. A standard air conditioner works by compressing chemical refrigerant, forcing it through coils, blowing air across those coils, and dumping the extracted heat outside. For every unit of electricity it consumes, it produces roughly 3.5 units of cooling. Engineers call that a coefficient of performance of 3.5. An earth tube, a simple buried pipe that channels air through cool ground, has been measured across 47 installations worldwide. Its coefficient of performance came in at 28.7. 28 versus 3. That gap represents billions of dollars every year in equipment sales, refrigerant refills, electricity bills, and service contracts. That is precisely why you have never heard of this. The physics behind it is almost embarrassingly simple. Soil is dense, between 100 and 125 pounds per cubic foot. Moving that mass even 1 degree requires an enormous amount of energy, 20 to 30 BTUs per cubic foot. When summer heat bakes the surface, it begins sinking into the earth. But it moves slowly. It takes 6 to 8 weeks for that heat to penetrate just 6 feet down. By the time it arrives, the season has already shifted. The Earth cannot absorb warmth quickly enough to heat up at depth. It stays cool. The ground beneath your feet is the largest thermal battery on the planet. It is sitting under every home in America right now, doing absolutely nothing because no one ever told you it was there. The Amish did not learn this from a textbook. They figured it out the way they figure out everything, by watching what the Earth was already doing and then building systems around it. Every farm in Holmes County has a root cellar dug 10 feet down. No insulation, no refrigeration. The soil keeps the interior between 32 and 40 degrees year-round. That is not tradition for tradition's sake. That is applied physics refined across 2 centuries. Then there are the spring houses. Small structures built directly over natural springs where groundwater flows at a constant 54 degrees. The water moves beneath the floor. The building stays between 50 and 55 degrees through the entire summer. Amish communities in Lancaster County and Holmes County use them to keep dairy and produce fresh without consuming a single watt of electricity. I stood inside one on a day when it was 91 degrees outside. I could see my breath. But the system that matters most for this conversation is what the Amish call the breath of the floor. Clay pipes buried beneath the foundations of their farmhouses. Outside air enters, travels underground through those pipes, and rises up through the floorboards, cooled by the earth along the way. The USDA documented this exact system in a manual published in 1903, specifically noting clay pipe installations in Holmes County, Ohio. That document is over 120 years old. The system it describes is still running beneath Amish homes today. Here is where the history becomes interesting. The Amish who settled Ohio and Pennsylvania came from Germany and Switzerland. Those same 2 countries now lead the world in modern earth tube engineering. Germany has 847 monitored residential earth tube installations, tracked by the Passive House Institute in Darmstadt since 2005. Austria requires thermal labyrinth analysis for any building over 1,000 square meters. Switzerland produced a 15-year longitudinal study from ETH Zurich, one of the most respected engineering institutions on the planet, showing zero degradation in system performance across the entire monitoring period. Zero. The knowledge the Amish carried from Europe 200 years ago is the same knowledge Europe rediscovered through modern engineering. The circle closed. America never received the information because someone made certain it didn't. In 1902, Willis Carrier invented mechanical air conditioning inside a printing plant in Brooklyn. His problem was not heat. It was humidity warping the paper. The machine was never designed for human comfort. But by the 1920s, Carrier Corporation launched a campaign called the Weathermaker, repositioning air conditioning as a symbol of American progress and modernity. Their marketing materials, and I have read them, explicitly labeled passive cooling techniques as primitive and unsanitary. Then, in 1930, a Carrier Engineering Corporation manual included a single sentence that effectively buried 5,000 years of proven engineering. It read, "Earth contact cooling is suitable only for cellars and food storage." One sentence, one corporate manual, and an entire field of knowledge vanished from American construction almost overnight. It was not accidental. In 1927, the first model mechanical codes were drafted with heavy participation from HVAC industry representatives. Passive alternatives were not banned outright. They simply did not appear anywhere in the document. The people writing the rules were the same people selling compressors. After World War II, the post-war construction boom standardized mechanical cooling as the only acceptable approach. Passive cooling disappeared from architecture schools entirely. By 1980, fewer than 3% of American architecture programs taught any passive cooling strategy at all. An entire generation of architects, engineers, contractors, and inspectors was trained in a world where earth tubes did not exist, not because they failed, but because they were not profitable. The financial motive is not subtle. The Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration Institute spent $47.3 million on political activities in 2022 alone. The residential cooling market in America is worth $29 billion annually. The average lifetime value of a single residential HVAC customer exceeds $15,000. Every earth tube installed is an air conditioner that never gets sold, a compressor that never gets replaced, a refrigerant charge that never gets refilled, a service contract that never gets signed. In 2019, ASHRAE Technical Committee 6.8, the committee specifically responsible for evaluating systems like this, rejected a proposal to create a performance pathway for earth tubes. Their stated reason: insufficient domestic performance data. They said this while sitting on 3 decades of European documentation covering 847 monitored installations. When researchers analyzed the committee's composition, 67% of its members were representatives of HVAC manufacturers. 2 years later, in 2021, the Building Officials Association of Florida formally opposed an amendment that would have recognized passive cooling in the state building code. Their public concern was inspection complexity. But every earth tube approved in Florida represents a central air unit that never gets installed in a state where cooling bills run $400 a month for 6 months of the year. Do that math yourself. The International Residential Code requires all duct systems to be constructed from approved materials with specific fire ratings. There is no provision for earth contact air handling. The code assumes ducts exist inside buildings. A system that buries pipe in the ground does not fit the template and therefore cannot be approved. Not because it fails, because the form does not have a box for it. Meanwhile, the Cambridge Public Library in Massachusetts has 42 earth tubes buried beneath it, resulting in 51 to 56% less total energy use compared to a conventional building. The Earth Ranger Center in Toronto operates 9 concrete tubes, each roughly 65 feet long, buried 10 feet deep. In winter, it warms incoming air by 36 degrees. In summer, it cools incoming air by 18. It earned LEED Platinum certification. The Allgemeine Krankenhaus Hospital in Vienna has been cooling critical care units with earth tubes continuously since 1994. 30 years of operation. Maintenance required every 5 to 7 years. Operating costs a fraction of conventional cooling. These are not experiments. These are proven infrastructure. But your building inspector has never heard of them because his licensing exam never mentioned them. Now, if you already own a home and you think this only applies to people building from scratch, stay with me, because this next section is specifically for you. You do not need to tear up your foundation. You do not need to remove your existing system. You need a yard, even a side yard, even a strip of land, the width of a car running along a fence line. Here is what the system looks like for an existing home. You dig a trench 6 feet deep along whatever stretch of land is available. Backyard, property line, it does not matter. You lay smooth wall HDPE or PVC pipe 6 to 8 inches in diameter in a run of 100 to 200 feet. Smooth wall is not optional. Corrugated pipe traps condensation and creates conditions for mold. You lay the pipe on a bed of sand to maximize thermal contact with the surrounding soil. You slope it at a 2% grade toward a drain point so any moisture that condenses inside flows out and never accumulates. One end connects to an above-ground intake with a screen to keep out insects and debris. The other end connects to your house through a basement wall or crawl space fitted with a MER V13 filter and a small inline fan drawing between 50 and 80 watts. What comes out the other end is air that has traveled 100 to 200 feet through Earth sitting at 55 degrees on a 95-degree day. That air exits your intake between 65 and 75 degrees. No compressor. No refrigerant. No chemical process. Just physics. And it is not just cooler. It is drier. Condensation on the pipe walls captures moisture and airborne particles. Humidity that entered at 80% drops to below 50. The materials cost roughly $300. The fan consumes what a single light bulb uses. The pipe lasts between 50 and 100 years. Your central air unit lasts 15 to 25 years before ending up in a landfill. Now, honesty matters here. In dry and continental climates, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Indiana, Wisconsin, Colorado, the Texas Hill Country, Kansas, this system works beautifully with minimal management. That covers most of where this audience lives. In high-humidity southern climates like coastal Florida, condensation inside the tube becomes a meaningful challenge. The system still cools the air, but managing that moisture requires more attention. For those areas, there is a smarter variant. Instead of running air through the buried pipe, you run a closed loop of water mixed with glycol, the same antifreeze used in your car's radiator. The liquid circulates through a buried loop, absorbs the Earth's constant temperature, and then passes through a heat exchanger inside your house. Cool air comes out. No air ever contacts the buried pipe directly. No condensation, no mold risk. And from a code compliance perspective, this version is clean. It uses standard plumbing fittings. It qualifies under existing plumbing provisions in every state. No special permit, no confused inspector, no HVAC code that lacks a category for it. The technique I want to close with, the one that made me drive 4 hours to see it with my own eyes, came from a man in rural Tennessee. He lives in a 1 to 500 square foot house built in the 1970s. Standard construction, nothing remarkable. His heating and cooling bills used to run about $240 a month in summer and roughly the same in winter. 3 years ago, he built a closed-loop glycol system, but he did not put it under his house. He put it under his workshop, a structure that sits 12 feet from his back door. He trenched a 6-foot deep loop beneath the workshop floor. He ran the glycol lines through the wall of his house and connected them to a fan coil unit he bought online for $80. In summer, the system pulls heat out of his house and transfers it into 55-degree earth. In winter, it pulls 55-degree warmth from the earth and pushes it in. One system, 2 functions, 12 months of comfort. His heating and cooling bill since installation, $0. The system cost him under $400 in materials. He dug the trench himself across 2 weekends. The glycol loop runs on a small circulator pump drawing 40 watts. The fan coil unit sits in a closet. No ductwork was modified. No permits were required because it is classified as a plumbing loop, not an HVAC system. And here is the detail that matters. He never touched his existing furnace or air conditioner. They are still connected. He simply does not turn them on. If the earth loop ever needed servicing, he could switch back in 5 minutes. There is no risk. There is no commitment. There is just a man who stopped paying $240 a month because he understood what the dirt under his workshop was already doing, for free. That knowledge is not new. The Persians built ice houses in the desert. The Romans engineered cooling channels under their villas. The Koreans ran air passages beneath floors for 3,000 years. Native Americans across the Southwest built semi-subterranean homes for 8 millennia. Every civilization that seriously contended with extreme climate arrived at the same answer, independently across centuries and continents. The Earth stores temperature. The pipe is just the path. The Amish never forgot this. They carried it from Switzerland and Germany to Pennsylvania and Ohio 200 years ago and kept building it because it worked, and because they never needed anyone's permission to do what made sense. In 1930, one sentence in one corporate manual decided you would never learn about it. In 2019, a committee with 67% industry representation made sure it stayed buried. In 2021, Florida officials blocked it from the building code to protect an industry worth $29 billion a year. But the ground beneath your house does not care about committees or codes or quarterly earnings. It sits at 55 degrees. It has always sat at 55 degrees, and it will sit at 55 degrees long after every air conditioner ever manufactured has rusted into nothing. The Amish did not lose this knowledge. You were simply never given it. Now you have it.